Welcome to Aston Means Business, a podcast from Aston University. My name's Steve Dyson. I'm a journalist who's interviewing top business academics and business leaders who are developing their staff here at Aston University. This podcast has been going since October 2019, and there are now nearly 60 previous episodes that you can find and listen to by simply Googling Aston Means Business. This is the second episode in the 7th series of the podcast, which is focusing on how the university helps to prepare businesses and executives for Industry 4.0 with Aston University's 2030 strategy front of mind. In today's episode, we're going to discuss how fast-changing and volatile global issues from Brexit and climate change to wars in the Middle East and Ukraine are impacting on international supply chain logistics. And we're going to explore how the Supply Chain Leadership Programme here at Aston University is helping industry to plan ahead and cope with these challenges. To discuss this subject, I'm going to interview Richard Atkinson, a teaching fellow and deputy director of the Supply Chain Leadership Programme here at Aston University. And also joining us is Tim Buchanan. Tim's the apprenticeship levy lead for GSK, the multinational pharmaceutical group based in London. Hello, Richard and Tim. Richard, let me quickly introduce you to our audience out there first. As I've said, you're a teaching fellow and you help lead the Supply Chain Leadership Programme here at Aston. But your background before academia is also, I think, very relevant to our discussions. Tell us about your time as an RAF fighter pilot briefly, but more as a senior commander of combat bases. And what did you do after that before joining Aston?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I think my history is relevant to this. And when I was, for example, the director of air operations in Afghanistan, where we were supporting the development of Afghanistan, the people I spoke to the most were our logisticians and understanding the novel supply chains required. And even now today, with troubles in the Horn of Africa, in the Middle East, and with the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, all of these conflicts depend upon supply chains, but they all impact supply chains as well. And that's why our program is so relevant to create the future generation of supply chain leaders.
Just to look at that in the past and in the present very briefly, Richard, tell us an example of how when you were commanding RAF bases in Afghanistan, tell us how logistics changed depending on what was happening. Just tell us how it impacted.
So very dependent on what was happening on the ground. So a supply chain you might use one day and might be interrupted by a improvised explosive device the Taliban had laid overnight, for example, or forces being attacked elsewhere. Or we would look to move Afghan zone security forces to try and calm situations, but you had to be adaptable every day. I could largely rely on our pilots to deliver munitions or food or supplies because they train for that day in, day out. But our logisticians really had to come up with the novel answers, the novel solutions, particularly with things like moving fuel, moving food. There were forces from all the coalition countries there together. And as we know, an army marches on its stomach, so you have to feed all those people as well. But there's an adage that we draw upon, which is amateurs think tactics, professionals think logistics. And that's why we want to work together in the future to build the future leaders of logistics.
It's fascinating to think about, especially with history and people like Napoleon and how they coped with logistics or sometimes didn't cope with logistics and lost battles and wars. Let's bring us up to date then. Tell us about perhaps 3 or 4 of the things which are going on in the world today and how they're impacting on logistical chain supplies.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can look at the Horn of Africa, which is diverting supplies of energy around the world, forcing longer routes, which of course increases costs, reduces supply availability. And we've got to look to the future really, because the big challenge that's really happening is global warming in the background all the time. We've already hit 1.5 degrees, and this is going to strategically impact migration and supply chains across the world. And so bringing these factors into sharp relief, we're going to really need sharp supply chain leaders and professionals to solve these solutions and come up with novel ideas for the future.
And give us one of those novel ideas, if you wouldn't mind, Richard. I'm thinking of perhaps something which is front of all our minds at the moment, the Middle East, the Red Sea, the Gaza Strip. How can we get around the fact that that's stopping as a bit of a flow on from that battle, that there's various attacks on shipping in the area? How are people having to change, and what is logistics planning doing to solve that?
Yeah, so logisticians are always looking at alternative routes, alternative sources of supply, alternative demands, and we're compounding all of this locally. Of course, we've just dropped into recession as well, so margins are very tight. So people really have to prioritize where they're spending money, prioritizing their demand signals, and such that supply chain professionals can really meet them, and such that in the future we need to hit situations where we can deliver water, food, and medicines where they're needed at the right time, safely, securely, and sustainably. So yes, we absolutely need our political leaders, our generals, our admirals, our air marshals, but also supply chain professionals to come up with these solutions, these alternative routes, to come with these are the people we're working with, not just with colleagues from GlaxoSmithKline, but from Coca-Cola, Jaguar Land Rover, DHL, and many, many other companies. And the magic of that, which we bring at Aston, is that they're forging a network for life themselves with all these other colleagues. They work together to come up with these solutions in the future. Tim and I aren't necessarily going to come up with these solutions ourselves. We're going to unlock the brains that are going to do that for us.
Fantastic stuff. Let me now turn to Tim Buchanan. Tim's the apprenticeship levy lead at GSK, the multinational pharmaceutical group. And Tim, first of all, just listening to Richard there, do you recognise the challenges that he's sketched? And perhaps, if you do, you can tell us what that means for global groups like GSK.
Yeah, I think what Richard sort of outlined at that higher global scenario, that impacts on us just moving things around the world, bringing raw materials in, processing those, changing those raw materials into the drugs that we all see on our shelves, moving those back out to the markets globally. We're in 133 countries across the world, so a lot of things are moving around at any one time, and when you have market launches, for instance, you need to make sure that the supplies are there. So around that element, though, the issues around the Middle East at the moment, transportation, climate, of course, they impact at that point. And then within the local level, even just moving things around within our sites, our number of our supply chain apprentices will be involved in scheduling. So it's making sure that everything's in the right place within the site that's needed to needed for the outcome of what we're producing at that point, and making sure there's enough coming in, enough going out, and that the right people are in place, and that the right paperwork's in place, because one of the things, of course, that we face now is there's an increase in paperwork because of the Brexit scenario. So there's lots of little things that we desperately need to be maintained to make sure that everything works, and we need highly trained people for that. And then they've also got to work in that wider environment where world affairs impact on us. So getting the new generation of supply chain apprentices up to speed and having them gaining the experience, and as Richard said, working with other young people from a range of companies is crucial to the way that we go forward.
It sounds it, and just focusing on GSK today, so there must be hundreds, if not thousands, of different lines of products and different supplies going on across 133 countries in all parts of the globe. I mean, just bearing that in mind, what sort of a number of people do you have working just on the logistics side at GSK?
It's a large population. We take on 3 or 4 new apprentices every year in this space. We're taking on 3. We're recruiting at the moment for 3 more. Those logistic people, our logistics staff are based on site, and they're in offices, or they are linked into sales teams around the world. We have manufacturing sites in 33 different countries. So you need to move those products from those countries to the wider markets that we serve. So, and within that, it's an ongoing revolving process, and it's moving all the time. And I think that's where the challenge comes, that if anything impacts on that movement, and that might be from floods in this country that stop, or snow in Barnard Castle, one of our major sites, that impacts on goods getting in and goods getting out. And while that might be a small blip, it's going to cause people to have to quickly readjust and make changes so that they're continuing to make sure those supply chains are working.
And another question for you, Tim, just to bring the conversation to Aston University, where we're sitting now talking about logistics and supply chain leadership. How is GSK making sure it has the right skills for the future, and how is Aston University helping that?
We go through a demand planning process for our apprentices. So we're looking, wherever possible, 4 years out. So if we're recruiting now, we're looking at these people being in the workforce in 4 years' time. So we're looking at what we know currently, and we're looking at what we might be looking at in the future. Now, there's elements of AI, for instance, that are going to impact on how some of the work within supply chain is done. So how do we start to look to prepare people for those changes, and what will those changes mean? And we came to Aston, we had at a point where we had a previous provider, and that had come to a conclusion for a number of reasons. And we actually started off finishing some of our apprentices on the chartered management program, and then starting new apprentices on the supply chain, because we continually know we've got to have a group of new people coming in with the skills that Aston are providing for us to be able to just continually keep refreshing our skills pool within that area of the business.
Richard, back to you. Tim explained what GSK apprentices are doing here. Perhaps you can describe what you're giving them in terms of the name of the logistics course, and what do they experience and learn, and what are they challenged with while they're here?
Yeah, thanks. It is a great privilege to work with colleagues like Tim and GSK. We feel very much part of their strategy. They're determined to impact positively the lives of 2.5 billion people by 2030, and we feel we're playing a part in that because they've got the wonderful scientists and chemists who are creating these life-changing drugs. But they equally need the wonderful and amazing logisticians to make sure, as Tim says, they get out to the right people at the right place and the right time. So it's not just my background. We're a mixed background of faculty with the UK's leading faculty in supply chain. It's the Bachelor's in Science degree apprenticeship in supply chain management at level 6. And we bring together all these great companies to develop these leadership skills. So I'm joined by a former vice president of an aerospace company, a former colleague who's worked alongside Elon Musk, a former director of business development for supply chain. We bring our skill, we're giving back to Tim's new colleagues to help them. First of all, we develop their workplace skills, their ability to stand on their feet, to articulate for the company, to speak up, to negotiate with colleagues. We also give them the core skills of how to understand warehousing and transport planning. This week, our colleagues from GlaxoSmithKline have been subjected or enjoying some technology and innovation sessions. In fact, that's what they're doing today. And we get through our vast network of contacts throughout logistics, we bring in experts who can give them the latest information. But the main thing we're giving them is the way to think, to unlock their own minds and to think of new solutions, to understand the company's vision and to realize they have a part to play in it. And as with all things supply chain, you can't do it alone. So you have to do it with colleagues and to learn those skills of working together. I'd also add that one of the special things that Aston adds is that we go out to their sites and see their colleagues in the workplace. I've not worked in pharma, so I went to your site at Ware and met with your colleagues there, Tim's colleagues there, and I'm going up to Barnard Castle next. And so I can really understand their experiences, and so I can do my best to support Tim and that all our colleagues do the same.
Oh, that sounds great stuff. And Richard, give us an example of the kind of challenges they're set. What kind of assignments are they given that they have to prove that they can do, having had the learning from you?
Yeah, so some of our colleagues are fresh out of school, and the very first assignment they have to write is, what are the things that are going on in the world that globally impact this giant company I've just joined? Because And we designed our course in concert with colleagues from major employers who shared that often they have colleagues who join their companies, might be with them for 10 years without even understanding the context of the company. So that's where they start. We then develop their reflective skills, their ability to reflect on their experiences. We all should. What happened today? How could I have done it better? What do I need to do to develop myself to enable me to better perform, not just for myself, but for my company as well? And with my director, David Leach, we've met with Tim and his colleagues to make sure that we're on track all the time, delivering our part in their strategy.
Tim, from your perspective, how are GSK's apprentices getting on here at Aston? How do you feel that they're developing, and how has the programme developed over the years?
Yeah, I think when we came into the program, it was relatively new, and like all new programs, it'll have its teething problems, and we need to balance out expectations on both sides. And I think over time, one of the key benefits of working with Aston is that we can talk and we can go, look, we think that this isn't quite working well. How can we sort of work together to solve that problem? And Richard's saying going out to the sites, that's crucial. Most of the staff involved with our apprentices, the line managers and those people who are setting the work and picking and working with the apprentice to be able to say, look, what are you doing next? How can we work with you to help? Often they don't talk to the people who are delivering the program because they're busy at work. Delivery's happening over here. The apprentice is in the middle. People like me who have overall management of the program are going, how can we make these things work? And at points you're going, there's simple things. There's communication. And once you get communication right in our education and development field, then everything else starts to work more effectively. And I think hopefully Richard I find the sites fascinating. I'm going to Weir next week, actually. We're talking actually for one of the manufacturing degree apprenticeships who will be coming to Aston in September about the plan and how that's going to work and health and safety. But being on site is different from me sitting in my home office and directing. And that's the bit, I think that's the added value. Outside of the added value of all the experience that the staff bring when delivering to the apprentices when they're here. That to me, other providers will have review meetings and things sometimes on site, but actually bringing the core delivery staff and having them on site, even if it's only a couple of times, during the length of the program, that's a big benefit.
And tell us, Tim, as well about the product, the results, if you like, of the programme. And remind us how many apprentices you've got at Aston now. And also, when are you getting your first fully made, fully graduated logistics experts joining the company full time?
Actually, this year. I think there's 4, isn't there? Yes. Anna and Jasmine and Harriet. Yep. So there's 3 or 4 that are completing this year, which we're looking forward to see. Some of them are already actually in role. In fact, I think all of them have a full-time role already. And this is this program, quite often, the apprentices end up in a full-time role before they complete the apprenticeship. Okay. And that's down to the skills that they've built and how they've demonstrated their worth within the teams that they're working with. And they will move around the business a bit as well, so that they're experiencing a wider range, all still with that supply chain scheduling link, but they'll work in some slightly different departments at times. And that also just helps build that confidence, because it's about confidence and being able to take the skills that you're learning and use them, which is what one of the major benefits of apprenticeships is that you're learning and transferring that learning into an operational environment at the same time. So your retention is so much higher. It's not going on a course 6 months later you might use it and think, I can't remember what I did. These two things work together, and then the assessments follow that work plan, and everybody knows where the next step's taking them. EPA is going to be a challenge. Endpoint assessment will be a challenge. Endpoint assessment will be a challenge because it's the first time any of this was going through. So we'll all be in that position of, what do we need to do a bit? And you always find that with a standard where you haven't been through an endpoint assessment process before. A lot of our other standards we know how that works. This will be new. It's and we'll work through it like we've worked through everything else, really, I think.
Yeah, Richard, listening to what Tim's been saying there, there's two things I want to ask you. One is how important it is on the apprenticeship programs that these students, if you like, they're almost not students, are they? They're more delegates, but they're both at university, but they're working at the same time. Yeah. So tell us about that first, and then tell us a little bit more about the endpoint assessments.
Yeah, so they're learner colleagues. They're professional colleagues working in the workplace 4/5 of the time. They are full-time employees for the company, and increasingly, as Tim says, with proper roles, with full roles. They get 20% of their time with us. And I thought Tim brought out a really important point. We're not perfect, but we very much welcome being held to account by Tim and his team. And indeed, his own learner colleagues hold us to account as well. And we encourage them to do that. It's so important, so we can check and adjust and refine. The endpoint assessment, this program only started 4 years ago with one company, or 4 companies in full, but we're now 30 to 40 companies. Wow. and hundreds of learner colleagues, because it's filling a gap in the market to professionalize the profession of supply chain. And we're heading now to our first experience of endpoint assessment, which to us is a celebration. It's a wonderful conclusion, because everything we do on these programs has to be something these colleagues can use in the workplace the next day. And they build this portfolio of evidence in the workplace. And I remind them that it's not for me, it's for them. So for every interview or opportunity they go to over the next 5 years, probably they can turn, when in an interview, they might, for a promotion, they might be asking you, what evidence have you got of something you did to do with? And they go, here it is. Here's what I prepared earlier with my colleagues at Ware or Barnard Castle or with Aston. So it's building this portfolio for life for them. So it's really important. And I think Tim's reflected that we're doing this together, and we mimic this relationship with all our other partner companies.
How are the GSK cohort faring?
Yeah, really good. It's really good to work with them all. And it's a real joy for me to feel I'm giving back. And most of my colleagues feel that way, because we see them come to us as you would on the first day, a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous. And now they're fulfilling really important roles in really important companies, doing things that will change the world. And we couldn't be more proud of these sort of partnerships.
Tim, in a few words, would you recommend Aston University for this type of apprenticeship program? And give me 3 top reasons why, if you would.
Well, clearly, we wouldn't be returning if we didn't think there was value in the program. There are other universities who are now starting to offer it. But from our perspective, we've developed that relationship. There is trust. There is, at times, some harder discussions that need to be had, and we need to recognise that sometimes reflects on us as well. And I'm sure Richard would agree. Getting some of the apprentices at times to keep some of their paperwork up to date can be a challenge, like the portfolio, like the recording of the off-the-job training, which there is quite a massive bureaucracy around apprenticeships that we all have to deal with, and if that partnership's working, then we can work through that. And I think the model, the delivery model works. The having, during COVID, everything was online, and a lot of people thought they'd cracked that online learning. And my view is, no, I don't think they have. I think there's still a lot more to be done. But the mixed blended model we have of online plus face-to-face here, Richard and colleagues going out onto our sites, meeting those line managers that are crucial element in how we develop the apprentices. Then having that interlinking linking is one of the reasons why we come here. The course has grown, the course has matured, and that's another reason. People have listened to feedback that we've put into, and said, look, we think this needs to happen, or can we tweak this a bit? And the third thing is, we get, on the whole, the feedback from our apprentices. We're never going to get 100% people saying it's 100% right. That just doesn't happen. But we get very high enthusiasm from the apprentices about the learning. Some of the other paperwork, at times they might go, why do we have to do this? And that's fair. But it's that learning experience. And I think, if there are three things, to me, it's all around how we deal with everybody as people. And hopefully those three sort of examples around people and how we manage that are the reasons why. And when they come, it's a nice place. They like coming to the campus too. It's nice, it's open, it's relatively new. And a lot of them mainly stay in the hotel, don't they? Yeah. So and they can go and experience Birmingham for a few nights, which isn't a bad thing for a young person. They've got to have some of, they've still got to experience some part of a university life that I went through and had a great time. But that was 40 years ago, so more than that. So for them, that's an important part of it too, I think. And then there's that networking with all the other apprentices. And we all have our networks, and this is them starting their first network.
Yeah. And Richard, for anyone out there watching and listening, how crucial is this apprenticeship levy training, and why should firms be interested in looking into taking part in that?
Yeah, I think it couldn't be more crucial at the moment. We've just teetered into a recession. Margins are small. Businesses are struggling in occasions. And it's a government mandate that the levy is paid once you're over a certain size of a company. So I would say to all employers, make sure you're optimizing the use of your levy. Let us bring our talent to you to help develop your talent for the future solutions. And I absolutely would agree with Tim that I don't get everything right, but I absolutely welcome being held to account. And some of that bureaucracy comes from the requirement that it is a government mandate. But we're learning how to do it better for the great bits, which are the coming together. So identify with Aston, identify with the apprenticeship, make the most of the money that you're paying.
Richard Atkinson, Teaching Fellow and Deputy Director of the Supply Chain Leadership Programme here at Aston University, and Tim Buchanan, the Apprenticeship Levy Lead for GSK. Many thanks to both of you for taking part in this episode of Aston Means Business.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to you, our audience, for watching and listening to Aston Means Business, an original podcast series for Aston University. Remember, if you've enjoyed today's episode, you can find and listen to earlier episodes by simply Googling Aston Means Business. And if you're interested in the Supply Chain Leadership Programme here at Aston University, or if you want to find out more about how your company can benefit from the apprenticeship levy, visit aston.ac.uk/business and you can find out more there. Meanwhile, we'll be back soon with more interviews with some of the top business academics, industry leaders and graduates here at Aston University. Aston Means Business. Thanks for listening.